Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about my brushes with famous people. This is, first of all, this is a Friday fun day talk. Doesn't have much to do with development, but it occurred while I was a developer. But it's fun and I think it's cool. So maybe you'd like hearing some of the behind the scenes, like celebrity people that I got to meet. Now, some of them I met and talked with. Some of them I just saw and wished I'd gone over and talked to. But looking back on it, I've mentioned here and there in videos famous people, celebrities that I've talked to, and I realized, wow, I've actually seen and talked to a lot of famous people over my career. But I think that just happens when you have a really long career and you're old. So, also caveat: I'm hoping that I get all the names right. Oh my God, you guys have called me out every single time when I called Michael Sheen, Martin Sheen, when I called Eric Estrada, Eric Spera. It's super embarrassing. I do this in real life too, not just with celebrity names. I misname people all the time. It's just, I'm not good at it. Never have been. So let's start. I'm going to do this roughly chronologically, except I'll go by company and event. And then at the end, I'm just going to throw in just some random celebs. So let's start with Interplay. When I was making Fallout, Fred Hatch, my assistant producer, he handled most of the VO. And he got to meet a lot of the famous people that are on our VO list. I have a whole video about famous VO people. But I went in to actually watch David Warner do Morpheus. David Warner, he was a photographer in The Omen. He was the Ultimate Evil in Time Bandits. He was the ambassador in Star Trek 5, I think it was. The one where they went to the center of the galaxy and God was there. Hope I didn't give any spoilers away. Anyway, he was so good. Just watching him perform was so good. Got to talk to him a little bit. Basically tell him what his character was going to be. And yes, it was evil. That was cool. And then there was one other big celebrity, and I think it actually may have happened before that. I was in my office working, programmer, it's boring. I mean, sitting there typing, and I go, it's boring to watch a programmer. My office mate, Mark, got up and walked out of the office. And then about 30 seconds later, this head popped in, and my desk faced the door. So I was like, and it was Steven Spielberg. I mean, everybody knows what the man looks like, but it was just his head. And he was looking around, he was looking at the posters on the wall, and he was looking at my bookcase, and he looked over at me, and he goes, "Are you a programmer?" I'm like, "Yes." And he goes, "Is this a typical programmer's office?" And I kind of looked around because I didn't know how to answer that, so I went, "Yeah." And he went, "Oh, okay, thanks." And he left. I found out later that he was coming by because he was about to do a movie. I think it was Billy Baldwin. I think it was called Hacker, but you can look it up. And he wanted to see what a typical programmer space looked like. Anyway, he left. But 30 seconds later, Mark comes in, plops down at his desk, and says jovially, "Did I miss anything?" And I was like, "Well, you're not going to believe it." So that was fun. At Troika, I got to talk to Gary Gygax on the phone while I was making Temple of Elemental Evil. I ran into things that I did not understand. And I think I've mentioned this before, but the biggest one was, why was Prince Thrommel, who was listed as being a paladin and lawful good, using a sword called Fragarak that was intelligent and chaotic good? And specifically, I would like to think that was a typo, but specifically in its description, it said if anyone who's not chaotic good, and it was written out, touches this sword, they start getting life drained. I'm like, but Thrommel is lawful good. But then I realized he didn't say Thrommel was lawful good. He just said he was a paladin. On the phone, he said something like he was thinking about introducing chaotic good paladins or whatever. Now, that was beyond the scope of what I could do in Temple the game. I wasn't going to introduce a whole new subclass variation. Also, I wasn't sure WotC would approve it. So he agreed, you should change it. He also told me a story about the temple was supposed to be a lot deeper. There's supposed to be an elder god at the bottom, an elemental elder god, which is why it was called the Temple of Elemental Evil, despite, all the different, priests that were there. Why did they worship a demon if they're all elemental aligned? So it was interesting just to get that kind of cool background. Also, he was super nice. He was so incredibly nice on the phone. I cannot stress how it was like culmination of childhood dream. Now, I had met him once before at a convention in LA called Orcon, and he signed my DMs guide, but we didn't really get to chat like we did here. I mean, we probably talked for like, I want to say about 45 minutes, maybe 30, maybe an hour, but somewhere like that. It was all blurry in my head. Same thing happened when I interviewed for Carbine. I said I had 4 days of interviews. Well, one day, the people from NCSoft, a lot of the Austin NCSoft group flew out to meet me. It was the final confirmation of me being hired as programming director. And one of the people was Richard Garriott. And we were sitting down to lunch, and he and I were just talking. He said he liked Fallout, and I was telling him how Ultima 3 is probably why I wanted to make RPGs to begin with. And we were like, blah, 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 blah. I mean, what I loved about it, it was almost like two old friends had met. If you were watching in the restaurant, you would think we had known each other a long time. You would not have imagined that we were literally just meeting, because we were like, blah, 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 blah. Eric DeMilt, who was the producer at Carbine, who had been the producer and a friend of mine on Fallout 2, still is a friend of mine, was a producer on Outer Worlds. He leaned over after a few minutes and said, "Hey, can you guys cut the nerd chat? This is a lunch interview." And at the time I was like, okay, sorry. But later I'm like, did you really tell Richard Garriott to cut the nerd chat? But that's Eric. Eric's like, hey, we got a job to do. So that was fun. I've talked about the Fallout 3 launch party. I saw Linda Carter. Didn't say hi. Really wished I had. I was like, ah. That was the first time I was like, celebrity, do not approach. Even though people were going up to her and saying hi, and that's why she was there. And if anybody had a reason to say hi to her, I'm like, hey, I helped make the freaking game. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. By the way, she's super gorgeous in person. Like, you've seen pictures of her, and she's super gorgeous in pictures. She's like crazy gorgeous in person. And I think I was like, I can't approach someone like that because I look like, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I went over to one of the bars, and David Spade was there ordering. I didn't interact with him either, but it was just cool. I'm like, hey, Saturday Night Live alum, news radio, all that. And then when I was talking, I spent a lot of time talking to Steve Meister, one of the programmers. And while I'm talking to him, I look over, and Will Sasso is about 10 feet away, and he's looking in our direction. And when he sees me look at him, he goes, and I go, and I wish I had said, hey, Steve, let's go talk to Will Sasso, because he was just standing there by himself, and he seems like such a nice guy. I wanted to go over and go, hey, did you play Fallout? What'd you think? We worked on the series. It could have been fun, and I wish I'd done that. So, Mr. Sasso, I'm sorry I didn't come over and chat with you. I wish I had. Then I was at PAX. It's now called PAX West, the Seattle PAX. I think it was 2010. I think I talked there. I think I did. It might have been the one where I talked about, I was on a panel with Brian Mitsoda and some other people. I don't really remember. Unfortunately, my note wasn't dated. I'll show you the note too. So I saw Will Wheaton. We were in a sushi bar, me and my friends, seated right at the front. And on the other side of the glass window pane, Will Wheaton walked up on the sidewalk. And he's looking at his phone. He's going, do. I'm like, oh, that's Will Wheaton. And I'm looking at him. It's Will Wheaton. Or Will Wheaton. And right before I tell my friends, hey, look at that, he sneezed into his hand. And then kind of goes like this, and then goes back to using his phone. And I was like, oh my God. And of course, all my friends turned to see what I'm looking at. It's too late. I tell them what happened. So, two of my friends who were there, Tim and Richard, they go to see Will Wheaton. He's signing autographs, and they got his autograph, but then they said, hey, our friend Tim saw you. He saw you sneeze and use your phone. And he goes, oh yeah? And he wrote this note and said, give it to Tim. I still have this note. I think it's really cool. So while I never interacted with him, this is my brush with celebrity. And then I mentioned going to the Fallout 4 launch party. I didn't meet any celebrities there. They were all in the VIP section that I couldn't get into. But while I was waiting in line, ahead of me in line, about 10 people forward, was Aaron Blahart from Conan O'Brien's talk show. He was the guy who played video games with Conan. And I saw him up there, and he's wearing the Vault suit. At first, I saw the Vault suit, and then I'm like, oh, that's Aaron Blahart. And let me tell you something. Those vault suits are tight. They leave very little to the imagination. Congratulations, Mr. Blayhart. Then, Game Awards 2018, the one where Leonard and I went and talked and said, hey, introducing Outer Worlds, this is something we're working on. While we were waiting to talk, we were the next ones to go on, someone came up to stand behind us, who was the person talking after us. I look over, and it's Rivers Cuomo from Weezer. And I'm like, what? And I didn't say anything to him. And if I remember correctly, there was someone with him who kind of looked at, and like back off. Like I was going to go up and go, It was interesting because after I got back to my seat, I put up my phone and I texted one of my nieces and said, you're never going to believe who I stood next to. And of course she was like, oh my God, you should have talked to him. You should have gotten his autograph. And I'm like, I'm too cool for that. No, I was just scared. So, also Fallout TV premiere, I listed everybody I met. I met Aaron Moten, who played Maximus. I got to talk to the director, Jonathan Nolan. I got to talk to the showrunner, Graham Wagner. I was also hoping, of course, to meet Ella Purnell. And I wanted to meet Walter Goggins and tell him that he was on my favorite Community episode, the one where he played the lawyer and they were reading Pierce's will. I wanted to know how he kept a straight face and all that, but he wasn't there. I didn't get to meet him. I did get to see Kyle MacLachlan, but I didn't get to go over there. So that's pretty much all the celebrities I met because of work. I did meet two others, both in Disneyland. I lived in Tustin. My house was right off the 5. It was a 10-minute drive from my front door to the Disneyland parking lot. It was 10 minutes. So I went there a lot, especially later. I had for a few years, my husband and I had Disneyland passes. And sometimes we'd go up there and just people watch. You know, have a churro, sit on Main Street, watch people walk by, and then go home. I was there with my sister. This was probably, my sister Dina, this was probably in late 80s. And we had been joking when we were driving there. I wonder if we're going to see any celebrities. We'll walk around the corner. We're near the water ride, Splash Mountain. And we go around the corner, and there's David Hasselhoff. And now he's got an entourage around him, and they're walking, and they're disappearing around the corner. So I'm like, Dina, look, it's David Hasselhoff. She just looks at me and goes, don't trick me. Don't make stuff up. And I'm like, will you please look? And she looked just as he went around the corner. So I don't think she saw him, but I did. And then one day we were there. Robert and I had gone on Pirates of the Caribbean, and we were walking out. You know how you get off and you walk out and there's a big wide exit only? There was a group coming in the exit only lane, led by a Disneyland employee, a cast person. It was Eddie Murphy. It was Eddie Murphy and his kids. And they were, I'm sure, everybody, he's incredibly recognizable. And I think they were just letting him slide on to the ride real quick through the exit so he wouldn't have to stand in line and just get mobbed. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I looked at him and he looked at me, and I'm sure he remembers this. Of course he remembers this. He probably went, hey, isn't that Tim Kaine who made Fallout? I remember it. It was just cool. It's like, hey, celebrities. And also it made me go, wow, celebrities really just go to Disneyland and hang out. And that's fun. Anyway, that is, I believe, all of the celebrities that I've ever met. So, some of these I've mentioned in other videos, some I haven't. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was just a fun Friday, nothing video of celebrities I've had brushes with.